Hey, less lethal people. So, hope everybody's doing great tonight. Topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while is high Joules versus firearms for home defense. So, less lethal high Joules for home defense versus a firearm. Now, I am pro firearm, and I will never tell you that less lethal can substitute what a firearm can do. But this is to get us all thinking on a bigger level. So, is a less lethal launcher that is high joules of 70 joules to 100, that's quite high, possibly a better choice than a firearm for home defense? And right now I know a lot of you out there saying, screw that. If somebody comes into my house, I'm giving them all I got. And I agree with you. And I also think the same way. However, I want to touch on this topic. Maybe you are a firearm owner. Maybe you have a rifle, maybe you have a shotgun, maybe you have an AR, depending where you live, what you're allowed to keep. Maybe you're not a firearm owner and you want something for home defense that will really get the job done. The reason I'm suggesting thinking of getting a high joule, less lethal launcher is because if you can't own a firearm, it would probably be the next best thing. And if you do own a firearm, it's something to think about having one also as an option, because depending where you live or depending on the dwelling that you're living in or the situation, a higher joule marker may be a safer choice in the long run. And the reason I'm saying that is not everybody is fortunate or wants to. I mean, I feel I'm fortunate to live out in the wilderness, in the country, where my neighbors are very far apart. But a lot of people don't have that. I don't want to say luxury, because some people want to live in the city, but a lot of people don't have that option or aren't living like that. Some people live in a major city, in a metropolis, where they're in an apartment building with multiple floors and several hundred units in there. Thinking about that, let's take an AR-15 for an example. You have a round that's going around 2,300 feet per second. It will 100% go through a wall and into the next apartment. It will 100% go through the wall of a house and out the other end of that house if you miss your target. In fact, depending on the ammunition you use, it may even go through your target and through the house, depending if you're not using the proper ammunition. So, thinking about this and thinking about who we live with, such as, do we have kids in the house? Do we have other adults in the house? Where is their specific room situated compared to your room? Meaning, are they right next to you? And if you happen to have to use a real firearm indoors, is it possible in the middle of the night when you're groggy and you're woken up from a sleep and you're all nervous and the tension is going and you miss, if you shoot through that wall, is it going to potentially injure, kill, or maim the person in the room that you're trying to protect? That would be pretty ironic. These are all real things that can happen. And where a high joule marker, that's 100 joules or 90 joules, bridges that gap is, yes, this can go through a wall, but by the time it goes through the wall, it has dumped all of its energy. So if I'm shooting my target, it is going to dump all of its energy on the surface of it. And yes, this will most definitely do serious permanent damage, especially a face or a head shot with this, or a neck shot, or even certain other areas of the body. No doubt, with the right projectile in a marker that's 100 joules or 90 joules, 100% it's going to stop somebody, especially if they're hit in certain areas. but I know what it won't do. It won't go through a wall and retain the same energy and hit an innocent person. So if you live in a city or you live in an apartment building where you are connected to a lot of people, or an attached house, or you have multiple people in your dwelling and you worry about that, this may be a viable option for you and possibly a better option in the long run. So I think it's nice, in my case, I think it's nice to have both. Lethal and less lethal, high joules and low joules. I know I'm a fan of low joules too, because when I'm out or on my job, besides having lethal, I can have chemical rounds. Chemical rounds are huge for me. I find them to be very, very effective. Another thing that I find this very useful for with home defense, and this is depending where you live, it can be useful both in a rural area or in an area where it's more developed. For animals, for instance, I remember years ago, I had an instance where somebody had let their pit bull off of a leash, and this pit bull was not very friendly. And I'm not really picky. I like all dogs. I believe that there are great pit bulls out there. I know somebody that has one. It's probably one of the best dogs I've ever seen. So I don't want you guys to think that I'm picking on pit bull. Just this particular instance, it happened to be a pit bull. And I was outside with my mother's dog at the time, which was a miniature pinscher, and that dog did not stand a chance. The only viable option I had at that particular time was a real firearm. I did not have to use it. The dog was fine. The owner got there fast enough and was able to control his dog and get it on a leash before anything happened. However, he knew I was serious, and I would have used it to protect my dog on my property. Had I had a less lethal launcher, that might have worked for a dog. Okay, maybe not a pit bull, maybe another dog, maybe in a situation, a coyote, another animal that maybe. I know I have seen low joules with chemical rounds work really good on black bear. I actually even knew a guy that shot a black bear in the butt on his deck with a burner, an SD burner, and the thing took off. As soon as it got plinked in the butt, the thing just spooked and ran out of there. So you don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to rely on that as my last resort with the bear, but it did work. And the bear took off. It was probably a little bit scared. He saw the guy, and it was probably, felt when he got that plink in the butt, and it took off. That is a very useful thing for having a less lethal marker, especially if you live in an area where there are bear. You don't have to permanently damage the animal. You don't have to kill the animal. And it's a win-win situation. I often wonder too, years ago, I had somebody near me hit a deer, and the deer wound up running and dying on my front lawn. And I was stuck with having to drag this deer off into the woods somewhere. It stunk. There were ticks, there were flies, there were everything. It was a disaster. And I said to myself, what would happen if, God forbid, I had a bear on my property or something large that was 600-700 pounds? And where I live, we do have record ones like that. And I believe it or not, because black bear aren't supposed to get that big, but they do. And I said, what would I do if I had to shoot one on my property? I mean, it would just be there. You're stuck with this giant rotting hunk of animal on your lawn. It's horrible. So, and it's disturbing for kids to see, everything else. But if you have a less lethal launcher, you do not have to permanently damage or kill the animal, and it will do its job, or it should do its job. Okay. Also too, with things like raccoons and stuff like that that are, menacing, or if you have other pets or chickens or anything like that, these do work. So it's a good thing to bridge the gap between a real firearm and still have something that's effective. It's good depending on the area that you live in. I know if I lived in a city area and I was, in a house where it was, one on top of the other, or an apartment, yes, I would still want a firearm if I could have one. And I would probably choose a lower caliber for that, something like a 38 special or something to that effect, and a less lethal. I would probably choose to have both. But to have something like a 10 millimeter in an apartment or a 44 Magnum in an apartment is just, where you're connected to everybody. It's a danger to other people because in that heat of the moment, you might miss. And the last thing we want to do is bring more heat on the 2A community, on the less lethal community, on ourselves, legal issues, and of course the worst, God forbid we hurt an innocent person trying to protect the innocent person. I mean, that's just the unthinkable, and it's really horrible. So it's food for thought. If you are watching these videos for the first time and you're skeptical on less lethal, and you're just a guy that's into lethal, you might want to think about getting into this as well. It's great. It's fun to do target practice with. It's cheap. Most everything that fits on a regular AR is compatible with a less lethal AR, which is great, and vice versa. And it can't hurt to have both of them if you can. That's, a definite plus in my book. And if you are a less lethal guy and you've been thinking about getting something that's higher joules, but you hear these things about legalities, yes, out in the street, you want to stay within a certain parameter. But in your house, could a high joule marker be very effective and very efficient and be just the thing you might need? I think so. I definitely think it's worth getting, investing in, building if you can do it yourself, and just enjoying it. So that's my topic tonight. High joules versus firearm. And I think in conjunction with each other, it's great if you can have both. If you can't have both, you should definitely have a high joule marker for home defense. Home defense, not self-defense, home defense. Anyway, guys, have a great night. Stay safe. Think twice before you do anything, and enjoy.